The MCAT Podcast, session number 84. A collaboration between the medical school headquarters and Next Step Test Prep, the MCAT Podcast is here to make sure you have the information you need to succeed on your MCAT test day. We all know that the MCAT is one of the biggest hurdles you'll face as a pre-med, but we're here to give you the motivation and information that you need to know to help you get the score you deserve so you can one day call yourself a physician or a med student. Welcome to the MCAT Podcast. My name is Dr. Ryan Gray, your host here on the MCAT Podcast, as well as many other pre-med podcasts, which you can find at mededmedia.com. That's M-E-D-E-D media.com. Today, we're starting off a 4-week series on Psych and Soch, a subject that a lot of students struggle with because it is very specific in what you need to know. And I like Psych and Soch because these are ones that I can just use a little bit of critiquing and knowledge and using those critical thinking skills and analysis to help me break down some of the questions, especially the ones that are a little bit more biology focused, which are included in psychology, which a lot of students don't know. So we're going to start off here with Psych, some biology questions, and we're going to go from there. All right, Brian, so we've covered a lot of science these last several weeks. So let's dive into some Psych for these next few weeks and see if we can get our hands dirty with some psychology. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sounds like a good idea. You know, what we've got lined up over the next few weeks is a bunch of psych practice. And, one of the things that we always emphasize here is how kind of cross-disciplinary the MCAT is. And the psychology section does include biology. So what I wanted to look at today was some very bio-focused psych questions, and then next week maybe transition from the bio aspects to the more kind of classical psych, and then do a little more of that, and then transition from the kind of typical psyche into sociology, just so we get kind of a good array, a good sampling of the social science section over the next few weeks.
Do you ever hear from students that do poorly or who do poorly on the psych section? And they go, wow, I didn't know there was so much biology. That's what got me. Well, yes, because I hear everything, right? I mean, we work with enough students here that we hear students say there was more of this, there was less of this than I expected. I was surprised by X, I was surprised by Y, because the students fall for that trap of thinking like, oh, all I have to do is study these high-yield topics and I'm good to go. And one of the things we're always telling students about the MCAT is, with the sole exception of amino acids, there's really no such thing as a high-yield topic, right? Like if you want to do well on any of the science sections, you've got to know everything. Got to really cover your bases. Yeah. All right. So let's start here with question 1. And since there's some biology stuff here, maybe I'll remember some of this stuff. It says, which sequence best describes the pathway used to transmit auditory information in humans? A, cochlea to the organ of Corti, to the medial geniculate nucleus, to the auditory cortex. B, organ of Corti, to the cochlea, to the auditory cortex, to the medial geniculate nucleus. C, cochlea, to the organ of Corti, to the auditory cortex, to the medial geniculate nucleus. Or D, organ of Corti, to the cochlea, to the medial geniculate nucleus, to the auditory cortex. So, I'm going to, based on anatomy, if I remember anatomy, everything starts at the cochlea, right? The sound, if we're talking normal sound coming through air waves, enters our ear through our tympanic membrane into the cochlea, through the malleus incus and stapes. So cochlea has to go first. That's what I'm going to say. So it's either A or C. I'll get rid of B or D. And then from there, organ of Corti is both the second one, so that must be right. And then it's either medial geniculate nucleus to auditory cortex or auditory cortex to medial geniculate nucleus. And
I'm going to say that auditory cortex is last on the list, so I'm going to go with A.
Perfect. And that was textbook perfect reasoning for the MCAT, right? That you used one fact to narrow it down, and then eliminated stuff that was the same in the remaining answer choices, and then got it right. So that was perfect.
Nice.
Yeah.
MCAT, okay, here I come.
There you go. Let's take a look at the next question. Weber's law can be applied to A, sound, as when a constant 30 decibel tone is played in an individual's ear. B, weight, as when two study participants each hold a steel bar that have different masses. Or C, visual stimuli, as when a man attempts to distinguish between images at different brightness levels. Or D, A, B, and C. All of the above are true. And so Weber's law, Ryan, have we talked about that in the past? Do you remember that?
I don't know if we've talked about it. I know Weber's and the other dudes doing sound transmission stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if we've talked about it.
Yeah, so Weber's law can be applied to sound, although in this case, not the way sound is described here. So Weber's law relates to what we call the just noticeable difference, meaning if I present to you two different stimuli, will you say that's the same thing, or will you tell me, oh, this stimulus is more or less intense than the other stimulus? So for A, with just a constant 30 decibel tone, that doesn't work, right? Because you have to have two different tones to detect the different loudness of the two different tones. And B doesn't work because it said two different participants are each holding their weight, but Weber's law is about a single person distinguishing between two different stimuli. So B is that as well, which means the right answer here is C, a visual stimulus when the participant tries to distinguish between images at different brightness levels. So one observer, two different stimuli. Can the person tell the difference? That's Weber's law.
Interesting. So Weber's law could be anything in that realm?
Yeah, theoretically, anything that, the human organs of sensation can attempt to distinguish between. And the basis of Weber's law says that the differences are proportional, not absolute. So this could be touch, pressure, weight, vibration, sound, brightness, color. I mean, literally anything that you can distinguish between. And the idea here is that if I were to give you, for example, Ryan, two very small objects, each of which weighs, less than half a pound, right? Little things to fit in your hand. And if one is 10% heavier than the other, let's just say I made up 10%. If one is 10% heavier than the other, you'll be able to tell the difference. Even though that 10% might only be a couple of ounces, you'll be able to tell it. Then I could give you two enormous blocks, one of which weighed 30 pounds and one of which weighed 32 pounds. And you would say, well, that's a 2-pound difference, right? With the little weights, I was able to tell 2 ounces. Of course I can tell 2 pounds. But Weber's law would say, no, you can't, because you pick up the 30 and then you lean over again, lift with your legs, not with your back, as you kind of scrunch down, and then you pick up the 32. And you would say that the 30 and the 32 are the same as each other because the difference between them is less than the 10%. So Weber's law, it's not absolute, it's proportional differences that we notice.
Yeah, interesting. Okay.
I
like it. Now I know. I always thought Weber's was specific to what we're doing with our tuning forks. But
yeah, no, with the different hertz, right? Yeah, no, with pitch, it's just one of them. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Question 4, and just a reminder, if you want these handouts, this is session 84 of the MCAT Podcast. So you can go to the MCATpodcast.com/84 and get the handouts there. So this is question 4. Which of these scenarios exemplifies the process of sensory adaptation? A steelworker wears thicker gloves to work after noticing calluses on his hands. B, a flight attendant gradually overcomes his fear of heights as his flight hours increase. C, a pastry chef begins to stop noticing the appetizing and distracting smell of pastries in her kitchen. Or D, a child starts to associate the smell of her dog with affection rather than fear. So sensory adaptation. I'm going to take that. I don't know if there's a specific definition that I need to know for sensory adaptation, but I'm going to assume that's going to be C, where a pastry chef begins to stop noticing the smell.
Mm-hmm. And that's absolutely right. So sensory, right? We want to remember that that's just kind of the raw data getting inputted into your face, right? Just the data coming in. As opposed to perception, which then starts to involve higher cognitive processes, right? What you choose to pay attention to, your culturally preconceived notions, right? Perception operates on a much higher level. Sensation is a very kind of raw biological mechanical thing. And so sensory adaptation is just an unconscious process, right? The relevant organs just stop responding to a particular kind of stimulus. So, unlike the child who starts to associate the smell of the dog with comfort rather than fear, you see a word like association, that's a learning process. That's not a just kind of unconscious adaptation. And so the pastry chef just stops smelling the food in the kitchen, right? Because there's just less response from the relevant sense organs.
It's like you walk into a smoker's house. If you're a non-smoker, the smell just hits you, but the smoker's like, oh, I don't smell anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my wife is so paranoid about that because we have a couple of dogs, and every time she walks in the house after work, she's always kind of sniffing. Does my house smell like dog? I swore to you, Brian, I would never let you get a dog. I didn't want my house to smell like dog. Of course, now she loves them, right? She's upset when they don't come running to greet her after work, but she definitely is aware of that. If you live somewhere with animals, you stop smelling them too.
All right, there you have it. Again, some psychology for you. This is week 1 of psychology. The next couple weeks, we'll dig into more psych and then soc to go from there. So hopefully this was helpful for you. And as we go on, you'll see that I struggle more and more with different subjects and topics as they get more and more specific in the knowledge that you have to know. And that's what makes psych and soc very hard for a lot of students. If you didn't know, Next Step Test Prep, who I do this podcast with, they have an MCAT course. They used to be known for their one-on-one tutoring, and that is what they are known for. But then, last year, they came out with an MCAT course that a lot of students are loving. When you sign up for the course, you get access to over 100 hours of videos. You get access to all 10 of their full lengths. You get access to all of the AAMC material. And you get access to 10 hours a week of live office hours. 10 hours where you can jump on Skype or whatever software they use and actually talk to their tutors. Talk to the tutors who made the course, the ones that know all of the information. If you didn't know, I created a review of their MCAT course, which you can find on YouTube. Just search for MCAT or search for Next Step MCAT course review, and you'll see me there talking about the course and doing a walkthrough of it. If you're interested in the course, go check it out, nextstepmcat.com. Use the promo code MCATPOD, that's MCATPOD, to save some money when you sign up for the course or anything else at Next Step. Thanks, Next Step, for being part of this amazing podcast with me here. And hopefully you get some benefit of these podcasts. I got an email recently from a student saying, I binge listened to the MCAT podcast the last couple weeks of my MCAT prep, and I scored a 516 or something like that. So I will take all of the credits with Next Step for his 516, but I'm sure it was just a little cherry on top. So hopefully we're helping you here for your MCAT prep. Join us next week here for another Psych Soc section for these next couple weeks. Have a great week. We'll see you next time here on the MCAT Podcast.